Lord, bless the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts, that together they might be pleasing in thy sight. O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So the story begins with old Father Abraham. God called him to go out to a land that he didn't know, to journey to a land of promise, to seek a home and a future. And the book says in Hebrews that Abraham and Sarah did just that. They sojourned in the land of promise. They lived in tents, looking for a city. And just as God had promised, God provided Abraham with a son named Isaac. And Isaac had two sons, twins in fact, kind of convenient. The first one, Esau, the second one, Jacob. Jacob means heel grabber because he was born hanging on to his brother's heel. Being the second born twin, I'm not sure that's a compliment, but there it is. Jacob. And Jacob, born as the third generation. Now, he has sons, literally a dozen of them. 12 sons, the 12 tribes of Israel. All Abraham's descendants, and as God had promised. His descendants filled the hills, as many as the sand on the seashore or the stars in the heaven. Jacob's favorite son was Joseph, the one with the Technicolor Dreamcoat. He was loved by his dad, hated by his jealous brothers. They sell him into slavery, lie to their broken-hearted father about him, and Joseph ends up carted off to Egypt as a slave. There he gets himself caught up in a fatal attraction with Potiphar's wife, something straight out of the soap operas. He languishes in prison, and you would think that the story was over. But God was still at work, and God saved Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph, says the Bible, and blessed him. Years pass. Back home, a famine hits the country. The brothers head to Egypt for foreign aid, and lo and behold, it's nobody but Joseph that's in charge. The family is reunited, they are saved from the famine, and they live happily ever after. Just one problem. They aren't home yet. They're still in Egypt. And that is not where God intended them to be. God promised a homeland, and this wasn't it. And so when the old man Joseph, 110 years old, finally is about to die, he makes them make one promise. I'm about to die, but God will visit you and bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. God will visit you, and you shall carry my bones from here. Joseph's last words. Don't bury me here, because we're not home yet. For Joseph, it was literal. He made them promise that when God delivered them from Egypt, they would literally carry his bones back to the promised land. But for us, perhaps it's a metaphor or a parable about the spiritual life and our journey. Spiritually. First of all, personally, in my walk with God, don't bury me here. I don't know about you, but I know about me. I know that in my own experience, there are those times when the tendency is to plateau, to settle down, to be satisfied with where I am. It can happen after a spiritual high, like an Emmaus walk or a retreat weekend. It can happen after some great mission experience, some moment of service in the world when you feel called and that your talents are making a difference. It can happen after a time of personal sorrow and grief or celebration and joy. It happens when we've completed a task or when we've experienced a new spiritual high and we decide, yep, this is just about as good as it gets. I'd be satisfied to just stay right where I am. Near the end of Jesus' ministry, he takes his disciples up on top of the mountain. We call it the Transfiguration because in that moment, for them, it was as if Moses and Elijah were standing right there with Jesus, and they heard the voice of God saying, "This is my beloved Son." In the thrill of the moment, old impetuous Peter bursts out, "Wow, this is super. Let's just pitch a tent and we'll stay right here. We'll build a little condo for Moses and one for Elijah and one for Jesus, and we can just stay right here on the mountaintop. We like it right here just the way it is." It happens, doesn't it? We get to a point in our spiritual journey when we've decided that we've about experienced all that we need to experience, and we settle down. After a spiritual high, we put down roots on what was meant to be a spiritual journey and a frontier. So, we set up camp on the mountaintop of our own spiritual experience. We built a foundation with our own fundamentals. Then we insulate it with a little bit of fiberglass from our favorite opinions. And then maybe we surround it with some liturgical lattice work of appropriate liturgies. Then we plant some perennial petunias of platitudes and a trellis of traditions. Maybe we install a hot and cold running baptistry. And there we sit. And there we settle down. Only one problem: that's not what God intends for us. Our spiritual life is not a destination, it's a journey. God is always calling us on. With Joseph saying, "You know what? Don't bury me here. Whatever new insight I've gained, whatever new spiritual experience, wherever I am in my spiritual journey, no matter how young or old, don't let me stop growing. Keep me moving, keep me growing, keep me stretching to be more of what God would intend me to be." I have a friend in Tennessee. Name is Steve. If you met Steve, you wouldn't be around him very long until he'd pull a coin out of his pocket. On the coin, there are 2 letters, AA. On the other side, 25 years. Steve will tell you, 25 years without a drink. But Steve knows that it's still only one day at a time, that he isn't home yet. There's still more journey ahead. In Wesleyan tradition, we call it Christian perfection. That is the ongoing work of God's Spirit in our lives, continually shaping us, molding us, prodding us, pushing us, moving us so that we continue to travel and we continue to grow to be all that God intends us to be. But the parable of Joseph's journey is not just about the individual, it's also a communal journey, our life together as the people of God. Don't bury me here, because we aren't home yet. There's still more to come. There's still more to go. There's still more to grow on the way of faith. Take a look at the Joseph narrative. If you read it in detail, I wonder if maybe Methodism in America isn't a little bit like Joseph's family in Egypt. The book says, "Thus Israel dwelt in Egypt, in the land of Goshen, and they gained possessions in it, and were fruitful and multiplied exceedingly." You see, they'd found a place in Egypt. They belonged. They were no longer refugees or aliens or outsiders or migrants. Now they'd made a home for themselves here. They were accepted in the society. They had status and place. Gee, this isn't so bad. Well, we kind of like it here. We like being a part of this society and this community, and we've made a place for ourselves. So maybe we just ought to settle down right here, and when we die, you could bury me right over there by that pyramid, and life would be just fine. Sound familiar? You could say it about Methodism in America, couldn't you? We grew up on the frontier, as some historians say, the most American of all denominations. In fact, there's still more United Methodist churches in America than there are post offices. We established ourselves across the nation and around the world with missions and ministry, hospitals and schools, seminaries and colleges. We have voice in civic life and state. Besides, we kind of like it here. And we like being where we are, happily settled in the land. But that's not what God had in mind for us. Methodists were called to be a movement. We're called to be people on the grow, people ever moving forward, people with a vision and with a zeal for changing the world. The early mission of the Methodists was to proclaim scriptural holiness and reform the continent, the whole place. And today we say our mission is to make disciples of Jesus Christ. Why? For the transformation of the world. That's our mission. That's our calling. That's our task until God's kingdom comes on earth, even as it is in heaven. And it is so easy to settle down in Goshen, to put down our roots, and to die there. Only one problem. It's not what God intended for us. And we're not home yet. Joseph knew that they were just sojourners in Goshen, travelers on the road. And so he made them promise, God is going to visit you. And when he does, carry my bones with you back to the promised land. And you know what? That's just what they did. When Joseph died, they put him in a coffin, set it over in the corner. Whenever Egyptian neighbors would come around for tea, they'd say, what's that old box over there? Oh, that's Father Joseph. See, he made us promise that when we leave here, we're going to take his bones with us and we'll bury him back in the land where we belong. Generations pass, 400 years to be precise. Generations born and die in Goshen. And I'm sure that along the way, some kid sometime bumped into this old box sitting in the corner and said, what's this? Well, you see, that's great-grandpa Joseph. Because he made us promise that when God delivers us from Egypt, we're going to take his bones with us. Because, see, we aren't home yet. This is not our final resting place. 400 years. Just a box sitting around in a corner. Once again, another generation rises up and somebody asks, well what's this? Oh, well, that's great-great-great-grandpa Joseph. Because, see, he told us that one day God was going to deliver us out of Egypt. And when he does, we're supposed to take his bones back with us. After Moses finally leads the people out of Egypt, the book says he carried the bones of Joseph with him. And the final entry in the travel log of the people comes at the end of the book of Joshua, where it says, the bones of Joseph, which the people of Israel brought up out of Egypt, were buried in Shechem. Finally, the end of the journey. Finally, home. But until then, don't bury me here. Don't let me stop in my personal journey with God. Don't let me rest around the mission and calling of the church. Don't let me settle for whatever I've experienced at this point of God's grace. Keep me growing. Keep me moving. Keep me on the journey until we all get home. I don't know just where this journey is going to take you in the next year or the next 5 years or the next 10 years. The only question is, are you ready to travel? Are you ready to go? Are you ready to keep growing and to keep changing and to keep reaching out in ministry for Christ until God takes us all home? When I was in college, at Asbury College, I sang in the Asbury College Men's Glee Club. We went around the country doing concerts in churches, dressed in our black tuxes and cummerbunds. We thought we were so handsome. I'm sure we were. Black tuxes, bow ties, cummerbunds. We do our concerts in churches. And I always remember the concert always ended the same. We'd start to drift out down the aisles of the church singing a simple song. My Lord, I'm on my journey. My Lord, I'm on my journey. My Lord, I'm on my journey home. If you get to heaven before I do, just tell my friends, I'm coming too. For I know his grace will carry me through I'm on my journey home. My Lord, I'm on my journey. My Lord, I'm on my journey. As individual travelers, as the Church of Jesus Christ, don't bury me here. Keep me growing. Keep me stretching. Keep me traveling until the day comes when God's kingdom comes on earth, even as it is in heaven, and we all get home. Let's pray together.